Hello, Mama friends. Welcome back to the Mama Gets It Done podcast. And this week we're talking all about strategic meal planning and how it can save you so much time and so much money. Are you ready to be more productive in your home and say goodbye to the dreaded mom guilt associated with a messy house and chaotic days? Hey, my name's Rachel, and the Mama Gets It Done podcast is for the everyday mom. Yes, even those hot mess moms who just need a little grace and a few tips for getting more done in your day. If you're ready to figure out how to stop hating cooking every night, how to give chaotic days a little more structure, and how to find more time for you in this crazy mom life, then you are in the right place. Welcome back. Hello, friends. I'm so excited to be here today. Quite honestly, this episode was supposed to go up last week, and I recorded it last week, and then discovered as I was editing that the audio had been completely ruined. None of it was right. It was like going in and out the whole time. So this is a re-record, and it's gonna be better than ever, obviously. I'm so glad that you guys are joining me today. We are talking about strategic meal planning. And this is something that is not your run of the mill, like just pick 5 recipes and go on with your life meal planning. So stick around. I am so excited. We're going to jump into it here and start with what exactly is strategic meal planning. Okay, so strategic meal planning, number 1, is budget friendly. It minimizes waste and it uses a reasonable amount of ingredients. I have a friend joining me today in our podcast. We have a new puppy, Pip, and he is in my lap, so I apologize if you hear puppy noises. It can only make this more enjoyable, right? So, strategic meal plan is budget friendly. We minimize waste, which means we're not throwing food away. We're using things that we have. So, for example, instead of buying a million different meats, we might just buy 1 or 2 meats that we're going to use up for the week. Or we're going to check before our pantry or our fridge before we actually go to the grocery store and use what we have first. And we use reasonably priced ingredients when we strategically meal plan, because part of this strategy is to keep your budget low, right? And to keep it sustainable for you. So that's number 2, it's a sustainable way to get food on the table every night. So this is not a meal planning strategy that is going to have you burnt out from cooking, because that absolutely happens. When you cook every single night and you're stressed about it every single night, you will absolutely burn out on cooking and you will not want to do it anymore. So this is strictly sustainable. So I stick to the strategies that I know I can make last. And number 3, it makes your life easier and not harder in the long run. So a lot of meal plans and traditional meal planning in general is really stressful, and it leads to you, because it's not sustainable, it leads to you hating it, and it leads to making your life really difficult, because you're just trying and trying and trying to make this thing work that is just not possible. And that's okay. So we're going to throw out all this bad things that we've been thinking about meal planning, or bad habits that we have with meal planning, and instead we're going to enact some really easy steps that are going to help us strategically meal plan for our families even better. A normal meal plan might just be one you just throw together 5 recipes and call it a day. That is not what the strategic meal plan is. When you throw together 5 recipes and call it a day, what usually happens is by night 2, you're angry and you have totally screwed up your week. You've probably gone to get takeout. You've probably got a lot of food in your fridge that's going to go to waste. And then you haven't looked at your schedule either, so you're either like late for things, or eating super late at night, or maybe it doesn't happen at all and you have to throw those chicken nuggets in the microwave again. I mean, I've been there, but we want to try and get rid of all that. So get out of your head that meal planning is picking 5 recipes and going with it, because it's not. So here are some steps to help us strategically meal plan, so we're doing this the smartest way and most sustainable way possible. Number one is going to be to look at your schedule. I cannot tell you how important it is to look at your schedule when you're meal planning. So, this is a really great example is like my daughter, we're not in extracurriculars right now, but used to, she would have ballet at 5:30 every night on Tuesday. And I knew ballet was at 5:30 every night on Tuesday. So I knew that night I needed something quick and easy, like in minutes, needed to be ready for dinner because we needed to be out that door pretty fast after she got home from school to go to dance class. If I was not strategically meal planning, if I was not looking at my schedule when I actually made that meal plan, I probably would have forgotten, to be honest, because sure, that's every Tuesday. Maybe that's easy to remember. But if there is something new on your schedule that you don't usually do, you can easily forget about this if you don't actually sit down and look at your schedule whenever you're meal planning, and then you've just set yourself up for failure from the beginning. Nobody needs that. This is exactly why you start to hate meal planning or cooking or whatever, is because when you're set up for failure from the beginning because you picked the wrong recipe on a night where you needed to be fast. Maybe you picked a recipe that was complicated. Maybe you picked a new recipe that just took longer than you thought. There's all kinds of reasons. So look at your schedule and say, okay, this night I have this much time. I can do this longer recipe on a night that we're not doing anything or going anywhere. But this night with this extracurricular activity or with church or with a late meeting that your spouse has to be at, this night I'm going to need something quick and easy. Maybe we plan for takeout that night because that's okay. But we need a plan. We need a plan to work with. But inevitably, if you don't do this, you're going to end up planning a large meal on a busy night and it's going to end up crashing and burning. Tip number 2 for strategic meal planning is going to be before you do anything, but even before you check that schedule, I want you to assess what you have in the pantry, and your fridge, and your freezer. The first rule to saving money on food and to being strategic about this is to stop wasting it. We throw away so much food. I know you guys do it. I do it too. I just threw away like so much food and it made me sick. We've got to stop it. Me included. I do way better than I used to, but I hate any time I have to throw food away. So always start your meal planning process by assessing what you actually have. And what I usually do is I make sure, especially the things that are going to go bad, that has a Best By date or something like that is coming up soon, or if it's produce or something like that, I put a star by those things that need to be used up. This is more for weekly meal planning. If you're doing like a monthly freezer meal prep, yeah, you probably should go ahead and get the things on your grocery list. Now, if you notice that you have all the things to make, like an extra freezer meal or two, yes, go for it. Prep it and get it out so it's like preserved in the freezer and not out in your pantry. But checking your pantry and your fridge and everything is definitely more of a weekly process usually than a monthly process. If you have a lot of food at home in your freezer and you do want to tackle freezer meal prep, this is where I really encourage you to actually really assess everything you have and do what's called a no spend week, where you try and eat through and cook the stuff that you already have at home and don't go to the grocery store. Really empty out that freezer, and then you'll have room for prepped freezer meals that make your life easier in the end. Tip number 3 is going to be to stop cooking every night. Like seriously, this is the quickest way to burn out on meal planning and cooking, is to cook every single night. Now, some people, you love cooking and it gives you life and it's just perfect for you. I'm so glad that works for you. That's awesome, and heck, keep doing it. But for anyone who's like me, who it stresses out and it gets overwhelming, stop cooking every night. It's not worth it. Instead, what you're going to do, you can prep ahead per week. And that's something where maybe you just make a few key things so that even if you do have to technically cook every night, like you don't have to do much, you just kind of have to throw it together. That's the whole point of freezer meal prep, is you prep everything in a bag or in a container or something, and then you dump it to cook it that night. So you do cook every night, but there's no effort involved. Another strategy that I use here is batch cooking. So I will make 2 of the same meal and then either put one in the freezer or the fridge for later. Or I am usually one who I only cook probably 3 times a week because I make a bunch of food and we have leftovers. So we'll have leftovers the next night and then I'll cook the night after that. And it's kind of a give and take. And we'll go out to eat once or twice a week for dinner. So at that rate, usually at least 5 to 6 nights a week, we're totally fine. And we can choose to go out when we want to go out instead of panicking and stressing and having to go out of necessity. The 4th tip that I have for strategic meal planning is do not pick all new recipes. Seriously, this is a recipe for disaster when we do this. So how many times have you looked through Pinterest and then you've picked out all these new recipes that you're going to cook and only to crash and burn like 2 or 3 nights in? New recipes are really fun to try, right? But they can bring with them like complications that make everything difficult. So like you don't expect it to take as long to prep because that's not how long it said it would take. And like maybe you had to cook it a little longer because your oven's just a little bit different than theirs. And maybe you actually didn't even like it in the end because it's new and it sucked. So there's all kinds of layers to new recipes. So my theory for new recipes is that you only try 1 new recipe a week. Start with base recipes that you know your family likes and then add on 1 new recipe a week so that you can build up like a base. And once you have that, you can keep them in a binder. You can do whatever. I actually have a whole binder over here of all my freezer meals. And so it's just like a menu of like, here's some things that you can choose from. Or here's the things I have prepped in my freezer that are ready to go. And yeah, it took a lot of time to build up those recipes. But once we had solid recipes, everything was easier. The last tip that I'm going to share here about strategic meal planning is to get your family involved. So the worst part about meal planning is when you cook a meal, you planned it, maybe you've gotten it on your table, and you're like, yes, I did it. I am super mom. And then no one will eat it. Like, look, at my house, I'm like, look, this is dinner. This is your option, or you can make yourself a sandwich. But it's the worst feeling when that happens and people don't want to eat the food. So a really good tip to combat this is to make this a family affair when you're choosing these recipes and deciding what to eat every night. Ask your husband, ask your wife, ask your kids, ask whoever's coming over, whoever's in your household. Ask them, hey, what would you like to have this week? And I know this is the hardest question because it's like, what do you want for dinner? Nobody wants to hear that question, right? So the best way to combat this is to have some kind of binder or recipe book or something that you're picking from, a list for them, something visual that they can go through. Or you can say, hey, these are the recipes I have prepped in my freezer. These are the things I'm going. Which ones would you like? What do you think? Give them some options. And that will make them way more likely to actually eat it in the end. And then it takes a little bit of pressure off you because you're like, okay, I don't have to choose every single thing. And hey, to be honest here, like this whole like process does not have to fall on you either. Say you really hate cooking, talk to your husband. Maybe your husband can take over the cooking. Maybe your partner can take over the cooking. That's okay. You do not have to if you hate it. But definitely try and get your family involved in this process because that's as strategic as it gets, is to think ahead and try and get these barriers out of the way. And a barrier is absolutely when they will not eat it, and then you have to figure out a different dinner. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Thank you so much for waiting for it. It's a little late, but it's here. Definitely leave us a review. Shoot me an email if you ever have any suggestions on what you want to hear on this podcast. I'm going to leave all those things in the show notes below. And give yourself a little bit of grace and a lot of coffee this week. Bye, friends.